Hi, and welcome back to Fedmail. Good to see you on this Friday afternoon. Here we are back in the studio, and we hope you've had a good week. Shabbat shalom to you. A lot went on this week. We celebrated Nancy Greenberg's retirement from the JCC this week. She had a gathering at the JCC to celebrate all of the great work she's done over the years there. You may know her from Man Talk or the other senior programs or the great author series Film Fest, or the Hanukkah program at the JCC. We've loved working with Nancy. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And we wish you great success and enjoyment in your retirement years. And we know we'll continue to see you. Don't go too far. Also this week, Mark Scheer and I had a great meeting with the folks at CJP to talk about our security initiatives. And as we are coming up to the high holidays, you know, each of our congregations are working on security plans, and Mark has just done a terrific job liaising with local law enforcement and ensuring that all of our congregations and institutions are doing what needs to be done related to security. So we thank Mark for that, and we thank our partners and friends at CJP and in the law enforcement world in these challenging times. And we saw the ADL report that came out not too long ago. I think I talked about it in a previous edition of Fedmail. There are a lot of Americans who sadly, actually frighteningly, believe that attacks on Jews are justified. Something like 15% of those who responded to the ADL survey, and something like 25% said that it was understandable that violence against Jews was taking place in the United States. And that puts us in a really difficult and dangerous position. So I'm grateful for anyone who offers support, and I certainly thank Mark for all that he has done. Essentially, this project to enhance the security in our community began over 8 years ago, and I attribute that wholly to Mark. So thank you, Mark, for that. Also this week, we sadly bid a farewell to Alan Cooper. His funeral was held earlier in the week, and his children and Bernie Rotman delivered beautiful remarks in tribute to a wonderful man, and he will certainly be missed. We know Alan was responsible for the Worcester, Florida Party every year, one of the great events that takes place every February. We're going to continue that and continue his wonderful legacy. And also this week, we got word that Gil Slovin passed away, former Federation president, and he will certainly be missed as well. So we offer our condolences to the family, and may their memories be for a blessing. A lot went on around the world this week. First of all, today marks 31 years since the AMIA bombing. That was in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, the Jewish Community Center there. Again, 31 years ago. I'm sure you remember it. It was a very large, high-profile terror attack perpetrated by Iran. It was a truck bombing. 85 people were killed in Buenos Aires, and it seems like yesterday, but it's interesting that now, 31 years later, we're still contending with the terror and terrorism sponsored by Iran and the government of Iran, and it's sad that that has continued now for so many decades. This week, there was a major vote in the House of Representatives to discuss missile defense cooperation with Israel. It was a $500 million bill, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican activist congressional representative, put an amendment on the bill to halt cooperation between the United States and Israel as it related to missile defense. Thankfully, her efforts were defeated 422-6, so it was overwhelming. But it's concerning because over the last 21 months, I know that there have been efforts on the federal level, but even locally, where, for instance, at Worcester City Council, one of the items on the ceasefire resolution, the quote-unquote ceasefire resolution, was to halt cooperation between the United States and Israel. And something like missile defense is one of the areas where there should be no daylight. Providing the type of technology necessary to shoot down the ballistic missiles that have been fired at Israel tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of times over the last 2 decades is actually technology that prevents further escalation in war. So if you're hoping for peace and want to see peace be furthered in the region, you certainly should support measures like ensuring that the Iron Dome system, for example, is well funded, well supported, and has the cooperation of the United States. You can certainly have your criticisms of the way Israel has conducted the war or any of the other policies, but when it comes to missile defense, there should certainly be unanimous support for something like that. And it's sad that the 6 congressional reps voted against that. Omar Tlaib were a part of it. Of course, MTG, who sponsored the bill. Massey, Green, and Lee rounded out those 6. Also this week, a letter that our local federation was a signator to was sent along to the NEA. That was the teachers union that decided last week to sever ties with the ADL over the ADL's materials related to Israel. Something like 350 Jewish organizations from around the country, around North America, in fact, signed on to this letter urging the NEA Executive Council to reject that vote that took place last week. Also this week, major news that the EU, that an EU country, this time it was Slovenia, banned Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, the two Israeli ministers, highly contentious Israeli ministers, controversial ministers, I should say. For the first time, the EU had a ban of an Israeli leader. This follows Canada, the UK, New Zealand, Norway announcing bans on Netanyahu and the other government ministers not long ago as well. But this was pretty big news. Also this week, Mike Huckabee sent a very strongly worded letter to the Israeli Foreign Ministry complaining that there had been too many difficulties in Christian groups obtaining visas to visit Israel. And he highlighted on there that the evangelical Christians in particular had been very supportive of Zionism and supportive of Israel, and he was frustrated with that. So we'll see what happens with that. And there had also been a very significant and high-profile bombing purportedly by the IDF of a church in Gaza, one of the I believe it may have been the only remaining church in Gaza, and it was hit. I think there were 3 fatalities associated with it, and President Trump put pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to apologize for that, and there was some contrition announced in the headlines related to that. But tragic to see it, along with also a stampede at an HGF site. That's one of the humanitarian sites in Gaza this week. And Hamas certainly contributes to that, but we wish to see everything done possibly to have the aid distributed in a way that is safe for all involved. And that's proven to be a difficult task, both because of the circumstances on the ground and, of course, because Hamas makes that, by making it more difficult, that adds pressure, puts pressure on Israel and enhances Hamas's own standing within Gaza. And lastly, we've all seen the tragic news out of Syria, where the Druze community, the Druze ethnic group, has been essentially slaughtered in mass. Israel is doing what it can to support efforts to protect the Druze population there. And Israel, of course, has a very large Druze population that is well integrated into Israeli society. Some of the top commanders in the IDF are Druze, in fact. And then lastly, rounding this out, continued talks for a potential ceasefire are in the works. It's been announced that people are bullish, meaning that they're optimistic that something will happen. I believe Israel stepped away from some of the key elements that they were demanding, which related to the Morag corridor, which separates North and South Gaza, and some of the demands made by Hamas that Israel evacuate areas around Rafah and around the Egyptian border. Now, at this point, there's still a lot of questions about what the future will hold for the prosecution of the war, how things will end up playing out. There have been some very high-profile questions asked by IDF leadership and by former prime ministers like Ehud Olmert, which was highly critical of Netanyahu's plan for a humanitarian city in Gaza. And there just continue to be so many questions about how things will play out there. But we'll see if in the coming week a ceasefire deal is announced, which would see the release of a number of hostages, with 21 possibly remaining alive, but also a number of Palestinian prisoners. And I saw today that Marwan Barghouti's name is back in the list. He was responsible for a number of terror attacks during the Second Intifada, but largely seen as the leader of the Palestinian liberation, quote-unquote, liberation movement these days. His release would be highly controversial, and we'll see if that happens. That rounds out things that are going on in the outside world in our own community. I just want to bring your attention to an event tonight at Congregation B'nai Shalom. They're having a jazz Shabbat, which sounds terrific. Their president, Elaine Solomon, had asked that we highlight it. Encourage you to attend, and look forward to seeing you at events around our community. Thank you for supporting Jewish life in Central Mass and around the world. Have a great weekend and a good Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.